Good day, everyone. My name is David Williams, Executive Director of the United States Association for Energy Economics. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Energy Options for Early Career Economists Entering the Industry. We're grateful to our moderator, Ms. Jazz Glastra from Kenyon College, and our distinguished panelists to educate our students and young professionals on gaining entry into the energy industries today. First, a little bit about the United States Association for Energy Economics. We are the largest affiliate of the International Association for Energy Economics and provide a forum for the exchange of ideas, experience, and issues among professionals interested in the field. The organization produces 2 professional journals, a newsletter, and holds conferences and virtual presentations, along with a host of other products and services that you can find on our website at www.usaee.org. If you're not already a member of the association, we welcome you to join. A few housekeeping matters in regard to today's webinar before I hand things over to our moderator. First, this webinar is being recorded for those that cannot participate in today's live event. If you have questions, if you have questions, please click the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window and type your question. We've allocated sufficient time to address your questions. And now I would like to introduce you to our moderator, Jazz Glastra, Associate Director for Career Development at Kenyon College. Jazz, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to be here and taking part as the moderator in this webinar. I want to thank USAEE for inviting me, and also thank you so much to all of our panelists, who I'll briefly introduce in just a moment. Just to give you an idea of what we're going to be doing today, my goal for this panel is really to give attendees a snapshot of the range of careers that are available for economists and those with economics backgrounds in the energy fields, and then also talk about how you actually get into the field. So how do you find a job? So those are going to be the 2 broad themes. I want to start out by allowing the panelists to really introduce themselves thoroughly and discuss their career paths. We'll do a little bit of Q&A with some questions that I've written ahead of time. And then, as Dave said, we'll have plenty of time to get to your questions. Feel free to throw questions into that Q&A at any time. And we will get to those a little bit later in the session. So I just want to jump right in with introducing all our panelists. So I'm going to actually start with Beth Offenbacher, PhD at CPCC, who is the founder and CEO of Waterford, Inc. Beth, if you could talk a little bit about your background, what you're doing now, and how you got to where you are.
Thank you, Jazz. I'm glad to be here this morning with everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My work focuses on the intersection of business strategy and market needs with a focus on sustainability. And so I work with organizations and professionals who work in this space. And I like to say I'm on my 3rd career. I began in the communications field. That was where my first degree was. And I spent probably about the first 10 years working in organizations in a variety of functions. And that's when I entered the energy industry. One of my first jobs was where I cut my teeth, was working for an electric power utility, an investor-owned company, doing stakeholder engagement and corporate communications for them. And so that really brought me into this field. My second career was in the environmental consulting field, where I did a lot of policy making, really trying to help communities and organizations come to an understanding about needs and projects and how they could serve community needs as well as the overall organizational needs. And I became a professor along the way. And so that paved the way for me in my work now, really doing the people development side of the industry. And I really enjoy it. I love it. And I'm delighted to be here to share some of my insights and lessons from working with people and organizations who want to be involved in the energy sector.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next, I would love to hear from Shri Vikas, who is the Director of Market Intelligence and Business Analysis for ConocoPhillips. Shri, if you could give us a little bit of an intro. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Jazz. Good morning, good evening, at whatever different time zones you are. Sri Vikas, as Jazz said, I work at ConocoPhillips. What I do in my current job is corporate planning, strategy development, and supply chain execution at ConocoPhillips. So I provide those kind of support to various different teams in ConocoPhillips. My journey into ConocoPhillips, which is an oil and gas upstream operator, the largest independent oil and gas independent globally. Before getting into oil and gas industry here in Houston, Texas, where I am, I did my schooling in India long time back, engineering degree in India, and I came to Penn State. And that's where I did my education in petroleum and natural gas engineering, and also in environmental pollution control, more or less like a policy kind of a degree. And I also took a lot of energy economics, statistics, decision analysis, those kind of courses. I could have got another minor in there based on all the technical courses that I took. When I graduated, oil was at $10 and nobody was hiring anybody. And what happened at that time is I really had to pivot and really figure out what would I want to do with my career. And there is a consulting firm out there in Washington, D.C. who used to do, and I think they still do, the kind of work in which they do energy work and also environmental work. And they need to connect these two together as to how we can sustainably provide, how we can sustainably produce oil and gas, and how we can provide support to various policymakers in federal government, state governments, and others. So I joined that consulting firm in Washington, D.C. I was there for over 10 years and moved into another larger consulting firm in DC. Initially did a lot of technical work and then moved into markets, policy, and consulting work for various stakeholders. Department of Energy was one of my clients. Peter, I worked a lot of projects for Peter, who is on who's in the panel. I did a lot of work for EIA and other outfits in Washington, D.C. and did a lot of and did some work outside DC for private sector as well. So that has been my journey. Really enjoy what I'm doing right now, and really thrilled to be part of this panel and looking forward to your questions. Thanks, Jazz.
Thank you so much, Sri. Next, I would love to hear from Michael D. Marr, who is the Senior Program Advisor at the Center for Energy Studies, which is part of Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Thank you, Michael.
Good morning. In my current job, the focus of our Center for Energy Studies ranges from local to regional to national to international. So much of energy today is it's affected by global, not just local events. And so we have quite a few foreign delegations, corporations coming through on a regular basis wanting to hear our thoughts on various parts of the global energy scene, policies. So I help arrange a lot of those meetings and lead the discussions in those. I also help set up workshops, conferences, webinars, and I do research on U.S. energy policy, natural gas, LNG, and the new one that we've started looking at is carbon capture and storage, and hydrogen as a potential fuel down the road as the nation and the world tries to decarbonize. Before that, I worked for ExxonMobil for 34 years. I have a PhD in economics. I joined as an economist in their corporate planning group. I did some strategic planning. I worked for business units where I actually tried to make money for the company rather than telling someone how they could make money for the company. And then I ended up in public and government affairs, some policy jobs, some jobs where the key was getting permits for major facilities, which means you dealt with local communities, environmental issues, federal regulators, state regulators, That's a fascinating thing for economists to get into. And I guess the only other thing to let you know is that for the last 7 years, I have been mentoring students at Rice as they get ready for the job market, thinking about careers, looking over resumes, cover letters, prepping for interviews.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we will tap into some of that knowledge base that you just mentioned as we get into the panel. Finally, last but certainly not least, we have Peter C. Balish, who's the Associate Director of Systems Engineering and Analysis at the National Energy Technology Laboratory, which is part of the US DOE.
Thank you, Jazz. Yes, thanks for that introduction. I am running that Systems Engineering Analysis group at NETL or NETL, which is part of the Office of Fossil Energy, which is coal, oil, and gas within the U.S. Department of Energy. So I am a federal employee. The group that I run is 4 teams. It's interdisciplinary engineering analyst. One team is specifically geared at markets, which is where most of our economists work. I've been at NETL since 2002. I was the first economist hired by that lab because they had their technology managers had a hard time understanding the concept of market failure. And we are a research and development lab. The DOE is a half research and development and half nuclear weapons and legacy management. But the half that's energy technology development is the part that we're involved in. I have about 110 people that work on those teams, and we do systems analysis of process, and we also do deployment analysis of technology, which means that we have to become conversant in energy economic models that are used by the Energy Information Administration and others. There's other models that are used to predict or project how technologies might deploy. I got there in sort of a circuitous path. My first introduction to energy was as a teenager. When I was 14, I spent a summer in Saudi Arabia in the 70s, where my father was a contractor building airport control towers in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. That was in between the time of the Arab oil embargo and the Iranian Revolution. So it's sort of the high point of tensions in the Middle East over oil. So the concepts of energy security became real in the 70s to the United States. Then I went to college at Xavier University in Cincinnati, got my BA there, and went to graduate school to the University of Texas at Austin, for all you Rice and A&M people. There I focused on international trade and econometrics. And after dabbling in labor and transportation economics, I took a job with the Internal Revenue Service, auditing multinational corporations in international transfer pricing, which involves putting a value on a transfer of goods and services between a parent corporation and its subsidiary units across borders. In that capacity, I was introduced to companies that Shriyan works for and Michael used to work for from an auditing point of view. And after spending 15 years in Texas, my wife and I decided we'd like to move back towards the east. And as it happens, the DOE had a job posting for an energy economist at the lab which is in Morgantown, West Virginia, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I took that job in 2002, and I've been there ever since. Just taking on task after task. So it's an interesting job. You have to bring in. It's really suited to a generalist in economics, but somebody who has an appreciation for statistics and modeling would be well suited to such a position. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Hopefully everybody in attendance can see that we have a really phenomenal panel with quite a range of experiences. So I'm looking forward to discussion. So let's jump right in. Peter and Michael, this first question is for you, although everyone else is welcome to jump in as well. So both of you hold both BAs and PhDs in economics, and many of our audience members are probably also econ majors or recent econ graduates, or perhaps have a master's degree. So what led you to pursue that PhD, and do you think that's something that recent graduates or students should be thinking about right away, or should they try to get industry experience first? Does either of you want to jump in first?
I'll jump in. I'd like to say I gave a lot of thought to getting a PhD program, but it was really, I didn't have a job. I was good at school, so I went into PhD programs. That is probably the worst reason to ever enter a PhD program. Mainly because a PhD program is so different than an undergraduate, much more mathematical, statistical. I should have prepared better for that. And I think since I got a PhD, it's become even more so. I'm not a big believer that people should run and get a PhD. It takes 6-7 years. You're really trained to be a professor. I mean, economics is something you can move into different sectors, but you really have to have a love for original research. I think there's only a few students that should really consider it. A master's degree, I would not get a master's degree coming right out of college. I would go work in industry, with NGOs, with government, get some practical knowledge, and decide if there is an MBA, there is a master's program that would help you move forward in your career. It may be economics, it may be an MBA, it may be environmental science. But if you get a master's right after graduating from undergraduate, you're going to exit competing with undergraduates because neither of you have ever worked anywhere before. So you're not going to get the reward that you would get going later, where you have work experience and a master's degree.
I'll answer that question in a couple of ways. I would say that if I work for the government, and I've been working for the government for most of my career. For various arms of the government, you do not need an advanced degree as an economist. You can get a entry-level position at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or even DOE and at the EIA. I would say, though, that within the federal government service, the years of education do substitute for experience to a degree. So you'll enter at a higher level as a master's, if you hold a master's, than if you did have just a bachelor's. And if you're at a PhD, you enter at a higher level. Within the Department of Energy, it is an organization of scientists and engineers. So having a PhD is a bonus. It really does matter. There is a cadre of folks within the DOE across the National Laboratory Complex that sort of live in between that world of government and academia. And so if you're in an academic setting, then the advanced degree, or even a quasi-academic setting, the advanced degrees matter. But Michael is right. Even within DOE, there is also an appreciation for folks with industry experience. I won't speak to oil because we have Michael and Sri who can talk to that. But within electricity, I would suggest that in order to work at a utility, for instance, estimating load on the system and what it might be next year, what it might be next week, having a master's level grasp of econometrics is probably necessary. So to answer it that way. but years of experience in industry do count. Years of training in economics will also help you.
Shri and Beth both also have PhDs, not in economics, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Let me start. Yeah, I agree with Michael a lot when he was talking about it. It was resonating with me a lot. You should not just, do PhD because you don't have any other option. You should be really interested in higher education in order to learn and in order to get the degree. For me, especially in industry, any in energy industry, oil, gas, other alternative fuels, what I find is there are more jobs for undergrad level, and as you get more degrees, the number of jobs are going to be fewer. There would be more interesting jobs, and they would be very interesting to kind of thing that you would like to do. There will be fewer jobs. So most of the attendees today are early career. My advice would be to get relevant work experience. And it can be in any field. It can be in industry, it can be in NGO, it can be in federal government. Get relevant experience because the field is really changing. The field, the energy transition is coming, sustainability is coming. The field is changing. The kind of project assignment that used to come about 5-10 years ago to me, and now they're very different. So get that relevant experience. It may teach you what you want to do. So that's what I would recommend to do. Maybe a business analytics degree would be helpful. That is getting much more traction in the industry and other places where they can teach you how to do data analytics, big data analytics. That is becoming much more powerful, and it's kind of tied to the kind of undergrad education people get. So it has some economics, statistics, decision analysis, some coding as well. So that would be my advice. Thanks.
And I'll echo some of the comments that my colleagues have shared, Jazz. I think there are two things that I would probably say about whether to go on for a PhD. I mean, I was always interested in learning, and it was something that I wanted to do because I saw it as an accomplishment I wanted to have under my belt. So there's certainly value in that if you enjoy being in a classroom learning environment. I do think that from a very pragmatic perspective, there is an analysis I would encourage people to do. I do this all the time with clients. I ask them to go out and do a survey on LinkedIn or one of the other job sites and identify a handful, maybe 20 or 25 jobs that really appeal to you, and look at the qualifications that employers are looking for, right? And so you want to do an assessment of what are the skills that you have that are on their must-have list, and what are those things that are the nice-to-haves that they have on that job announcement. And think about where you might want to land in your career. What really appeals to you? What drives your interest? Are you interested in sustainable finance? Are you interested in the renewables? Are you interested in clean tech? Where might you want to go in your career? And look at what organizations are looking for. Shri's observation about organizations that are hiring and how the opportunities are fewer with advanced degrees, I think is very insightful. And so to really get your feet wet in a part of the industry that excites you, and it may not be the place where you want to land long term, but to really go out and explore and understand before you make some decisions about any advanced schooling that you'd like to have. I'll just close with one comment. I did find my PhD program to be very instructive, and I have a degree in social science. And so that teaches a way of thinking. It's an approach. I bring it to every project I have when I'm analyzing any assignment I have, whether it's on an individual basis or with an organization. I bring that toolkit with me. So it is valuable. It does require time and effort and money, and it's a commitment. So to take all those things into consideration, I think is valuable.
So one thing I just want to jump out is if you go to get a PhD or even a master's degree, it is not a continuation of undergraduate where everything is set up at the university so you can have fun, you got dorm, you got park. It is more like a job. You're doing this for your career because you want to develop some expertise. And so it is quite, and the expectations from your professors are way higher. A lot more work, a lot more reading, a lot more math, a lot more statistics. So, talk to some of your professors about what a PhD program would be in economics. I think that would be helpful too. Also, if you decide to wait to get a master's, say you work 5 years and then you go get a master's, that's a year or two. Well, when you finish your master's, you'll be 29 years old. You still have 30 or 35 years of work ahead of you. You're not behind the curve because now you have 5 years experience and now another degree, and you have a really long life ahead of you in the workforce. So I think that's another thing to think about. Even waiting a year or two for a PhD takes a lot longer, but even if you finish your PhD when you're 33, 35, again, you still have 30 years worth of work looking forward into the future.
There's also a financial commitment. I just want to emphasize that, especially in the economic situation we are all amidst right now. I was fortunate. I worked for an organization that paid for most of my master's degree. So there are organizations today that provide education benefits. And when you are interviewing for a job, that is a completely legitimate question. I would encourage you to ask that question of the people you're interviewing with. And that demonstrates an interest in your own professional development. And most organizations have a policy that will provide some benefits. There might be a cost sharing that's involved. In most organizations, there's a requirement that you get a certain grade level to receive that reimbursement. So ask about that policy, but inquire, because that is something that if it's available to you, it's a benefit to them. They're keeping you as part of their team, so they really see the value, and you are walking away with something that no one can ever take away with you, that you can bring in your portfolio long term. So definitely inquire about that when you're interviewing with organizations.
Also, I think, remember, a master's program, you do not have the scholarships at most master's programs that you do as an undergraduate. Rice has a Master's of Energy Economics. It's a 12-month program. It costs $45,000. Everybody pays $45,000. The business school across the way, 2-year program, an MBA, is going to cost you $120,000. They have some scholarships, but not a lot. So that's another reason to say, I'm going to go back because this is going to jumpstart a career, not just because, oh, I want to keep going to school, that'll be fun. So think of that cost. Now, PhD programs often give you some stipend. You'll be poor, but you'll probably be able to afford, an apartment and, get by.
Every young person's dream, poverty with the ability to afford an apartment. All right. Well, I think we've covered that topic pretty well. I do have to quickly shout out my alma mater for my master's degree, which was Ohio State. I have a master's in environment and natural resources, and it was paid for by Ohio State. And so thank you to the taxpayers of Ohio. They have really great graduate funding. So check out Ohio State. Gotta put in a plug for the Buckeyes. Okay, I do want to switch gears quickly here. Beth, in particular, has a lot of expertise in sort of the green tech, green energy. And so your expertise is kind of at the intersection of that, as well as talent management. And I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts specifically for people who are interested in those industries, if there are any specific skills, certifications, things they should know, particular to the kind of green jobs pipeline, to make themselves more marketable. And I also recognize that several others of you have mentioned carbon capture technology, so Perhaps after Beth shares her thoughts, if anybody else would like to jump in on that, that would be wonderful.
Thanks, Jazz. I'll share a couple of strategic observations and then some tactical recommendations. First of all, strategically, there are several certification programs. We've talked about certificates a little bit and master's degrees. The certificate programs that are available at the academic level, there are several of them out there, tons of them if you look online, depending on your particular area of interest. And I'd encourage you to really explore, again, the parts of the field that you want to pursue. And if you're not sure, you get a job and you're like, well, this is an interesting job and I'm getting a salary and I'm engaged, but I'm not sure this is where I really want to land. Mentorship and volunteering are great ways to really identify what your passion is. So for example, I'm a sustainability mentor with Clean Tech Open. They are looking for people to guide startups in thinking through projects and initiatives in that field. And so that is a great opportunity for someone to really learn more about clean tech and where they might want to play in that area. So look for opportunities that can help you identify that, and that can lead you to exploring whether you want to go for a certificate program at the academic level or a certification. And I'll just mention a few of the organizations out there that I'd suggest considering. The Association of Energy Engineers has, I think, probably a dozen certification programs. They offer certifications in areas of power and gas, sustainable development, certified energy manager, just really excellent material, certified demand side manager. So think about things that are going to tee you up on the industry side. You've got this great suite of skills as an economist, but how can that be relevant to industry? So AEE is one. I'd also encourage you on the green side, the Solar Energy International has some that are connecting with that part of renewables. I'm also seeing huge interest in ESG. So energy finance is really hot right now. So looking at, there's an organization, the Finance Renewable Energy Institute is another. And then on the clean tech side, for example, the International Association of Nanotechnology has a certificate program. So those are some things that if you want that badge, which HR people are often looking at and hiring managers, that you've got a credential that says, I understand what your needs and your issues are in this part of the industry, and I match that up with my economics experience and expertise. So to be able to demonstrate that you really get their reality and that you can be a valued resource to them. On the tactical side, there are three quick things that I'll say. One of the things is really important to identify your strengths. And this is where career services, like I know at Kenyon that you work in, Jazz. So go to the Career Center at your college or university. They have great resources for you. There are others available outside the organization as well. But you want to really be able to clearly identify what your strengths are and the value that you're going to bring to a hiring organization. Second thing, you need to have a strategy and a plan. One of my colleagues said, if you don't have a plan for your career, someone else will. So you want to have a plan and a strategy for where you want to go. And it might be that it's a strategy and a plan for the next 10 years, and that's enough, right? Or the next 5 years. But you want to be in control of that and driving that train. And the third thing is to use and develop your network. Be involved in organizations like USAEE and all of the organizations that you've heard mentioned today and others. Find those that are connected with your part of the industry and develop your network, get involved with them, because the data shows more than 80% of jobs are landed from people in your network. I know that's been the experience that I've had myself. And so you want to really tap into that and have people know you, because they'll refer you to jobs inside an organization or give your application a boost. So you really want to learn how to use that. There is an ebook that I have that talks a little bit about career strategy, and I'll put it in the chat in a moment in case that's helpful to anyone.
I see
Yeah,
Sri nodding vigorously.
Yeah, I'll just add that's wealth of wisdom, Beth. Everything what you said resonated with me perfectly. Actually, that's absolutely spot on the kind of things that early career people should be doing. One thing I'll add is as you look into your relevant work experience in the field of energy, and as I said, it's a rewarding industry, but it's also changing. There's a lot of change happening. So be part of that change. The big oil and gas companies, they're going through major changes as well. And there are sustainability group, there are ESG teams, there are climate change, biodiversity groups. There's the ESG is a big thing in traditional oil and gas companies. And so people are looking for those kind of experiences in traditional oil and gas companies as well. And be part of that change. That can be very rewarding because you would have solid careers because you would have a kind of a base of a large company, and as part of that, it's changing as well. So you will be part of the change as well. And what I'm finding in our company, we are an upstream oil and gas company. We are looking for people who have these kind of experiences as well. So I just want to add that it's not all about startups. It's not all about industries which are just getting started. That is definitely where the action is. But there are action in traditional oil and gas companies as well, which is changing dramatically.
I'd like to jump in on the kind of the new energy. There are two things I really want to mention that weren't there for the first 20 years of my career. One, electricity was kind of a boring, heavily regulated, not very innovative, not exciting. The last 20 years, that has just been blown out. You have renewables, you have a lot more gas, you have international trade in natural gas, you have battery storage coming in. It is, you have more competition in selling electricity. It is a fascinating field. The second thing, I would say the first 20 years of my life, the digital world was not hugely impactful in most of the business. The last 20 years, digital is becoming more and more important. And so you might think of traditional companies in electricity. For example, you might say, I'll work for a solar company or a wind company. Well, two of them, I'll mention two major companies that are heavily involved in energy, Google and Amazon, both selling services to all sorts of different energy on how to optimize their systems, how to bring in technology, digital, make things more efficient. They're also major users of energy, and they tend to be going to buying maybe even building some of their own solar or their own battery storage. So think of some non-traditional players in this that didn't exist 20 years ago and don't really fit in any one niche by itself. And I just mentioned two of those. And I think the other thing too is when I joined the oil industry, I ended up working with people who had 30, 35 years of experience when I first started. If you move into the battery world for EVs or for electric storage, no one has 30, 35 years of experience. That is a young person's world. You are developing a new company. even thinking about supply chains, which may sound kind of boring, but I know a recent student who went to work for Tesla in their battery supply chain. Where do you get the minerals? Where do you get the processed metals? Who's building different parts of the battery around the world? That is an exciting world as you think about trying to expand electric vehicles, is building that supply chain that was not there 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So think of those things too. I'm from the oil and gas sector. There are plenty of jobs there too. I just want to make it seem that there are so many more exciting opportunities across all fields today, mainly because the competition across fields is so strong. When I started, okay, you could use diesel or gasoline in your car. There was no substitutes. That was kind of a nice world. That isn't the world today. When I started, coal was the dominant in the United States. Then it became gas. Now we have gas and renewables. Things are changing. So, look broadly. And if you do have an entrepreneurial streak, go for one of the younger companies. You don't have to be a brand new company, but a Tesla, a Google, a solar company, some of those, because the experience behind that, you don't have people with decades of experience holding you back. I'll let that go.
I'll just add that a good education in economics will help you, especially if you become well versed in the notion of opportunity cost. That's something that the scientists and the engineers don't necessarily grasp. That's an economic concept, as is the notion of economic profit versus normal profit. Those simple concepts that are taught in any microeconomics class will put you in good stead. And just with respect to energy is huge. Energy is a massive industry, whether it's in transportation, electricity, or industrial usage of energy. And you'll become acquainted with that. So when people are trying to change this or that sector, the notions of stranded costs, system costs, and essentially opportunity costs will be your everyday experience.
Okay, I
Just
want to
jump in with one more thing.
Go ahead.
If you have a second language or a third language, Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, Russian, for example. Again, this is a global Portuguese. This is a global world today in energy. That is an advantage that might open up doors for you, because you can work with people who don't necessarily speak English as their first language. So think of that too.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent insight. Okay, I have a question from the audience, which I think is kind of a nice transition from what we were just talking about. So someone has asked, with the energy industry undergoing this huge transition and all these changes, is there value in specializing in the economics of the fossil fuel industry, or should early economists really be thinking about transitioning to the economics of renewables? So what's the kind of interplay between those two things? And I'll open it up for anyone who wants to address it.
I'll jump in just first and set a little context. At DOE, whether you're in EIA or the program offices, you look at the U.S. energy economic system as part of a greater international one. But we tend to measure things in big units. And since we're the U.S., it's English units. And we measure them in terms of quadrillion British thermal units. So the energy economy in the United States is essentially 100 quads. 80 quads, 80% of that is from fossil fuels, whether it's natural gas, oil, or coal. Michael mentioned the switch between between natural gas and coal. Natural gas has grown tremendously in the last decade, primarily at the expense of coal. There's so much natural gas that people are beginning to think about how it might substitute for oil within the United States. The penetration of renewable energies has been largely on the margins of the system that has been dominated by fossil fuels, and within electricity, fossil fuels and nuclear power. As for policy reasons, those penetration levels increase, the attributes of renewable energy, and if they're intermittent, and the associated system costs will come into play for any region, as they're finding out in the last month or so in California. So there's lots of issues. They're very intricate, but I just want to emphasize that the system is very large, and going from a small player helped by tax policy to a predominant provider of energy, and will entrain a bunch of issues. And the fundamental thing that I'll leave you with is that energy is a derived demand. We don't take coal, oil, gas out of the ground just because we want to. We want to provide lighting, we want to provide mobility, we want to provide other energy services that consumers need for their daily lives. Thank you.
Yeah, think about like a system, like what Peter was saying. A system's way of thinking, in my view, is a better way of thinking, and how different energy resources are contributing to that, and what policy and economic drivers are going to move one versus another. Because 80% on the overall demand is fossil fuel, and the other 20 is all others. They need to coexist, and we need to figure out the relative economics of one versus another. What is really driving that economics? So understanding all the different aspects of energy resources and their costs and benefits is important. Michael, you are mute.
Yes, if anybody else wants to jump in on that.
I've said too much. I'll let Beth talk.
Okay. We do have another audience question that really starts to transition us into talking brass tacks about, okay, but how do I find a job? So this question was directed to you, Michael, but I think several of you will have thoughts on this. So as a PhD student in economics, focusing on energy, this person does not have experience in the field yet, so it doesn't sound like any industry experience. So where should somebody who is getting that PhD look in the job market? What kinds of jobs should they be targeting in their job search?
So a PhD student, what they're selling is incredible skills at data analysis, statistics, understanding markets. That's what's going to get them a job outside of academia. Inside academia, if you want to stay in academia, talk to your professors, talk to your advisors. They can help you manage. If you're trying to go outside, your professors probably aren't as helpful because they've had a career mainly in academia. But search out other economists, PhD economists that are in industry or in government. Find out how they got started in their career. LinkedIn is a great way to do that. Maybe your university also has a list of people who got PhDs in economics and went outside of academia. I don't think experience matters quite as much when you have a PhD, because you are selling really your technical skills, as long as you can apply them to things that probably may not be as much interest to a theoretical economist, but a lot of theoretical economists, the outside world is not really looking for them because it doesn't tie into what's really going on. So, and I bet you Peter can jump in too about, PhDs in government, and Beth can also talk about, how do you find jobs?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Beth.
No, you go ahead, Peter.
Okay. For the federal government, there's USA Jobs. It's a big job site. If you just type in economist, 100 positions might come up from across the government. My own experience is that I spent a couple of years working with professors who had side jobs as expert witnesses and things of that sort. And I did that for a couple of years, and that enabled me to claim experience, which was worth 2 grade levels in the federal government. So for better or worse, the federal government doesn't put a big premium on a PhD. It gets you a GS-11 with 0 experience. But if you have a year or 2, all of a sudden you can become a GS-13, which is as high as most people in the federal government get. The general service is a GS, is from 1 to 15. So the highest position within the general service, civil service, is a 15. Above that, you're either a star researcher or a executive within the federal government. So some kind of experience with a consultant of any kind, whether it's a professor with a side job or a consulting firm, there's a lot of boutique consulting firms out there now, would help you get a job in the government at a decent salary level.
And I would chime in and say, coming from the Washington, D.C. area, don't forget about think tanks and nonprofits. They all are trying to keep an eye on what's going on in industry and advise policymakers on trends and issues that they need to be mindful of. There are also a ton of PhDs. I know some of my former students and colleagues work for organizations like the Congressional Research Service, looking to help people really sort through the complexities, and then the Hill itself, serving on the staffs of the committees that explore energy issues. So there are a lot of opportunities, and the advice that's been talked about, getting out and talking with people in your network, reaching out through LinkedIn, through your alumni network. Most people are happy to have a 15-minute phone call where you do a little interview with them, find out about their job, get their advice. People love to advise others, as you can hear from our conversation today. And so really, really tap into that as you think about where you want to go next.
Yeah, I'll put a shameless plug of USAEE. So USAEE has a mentoring program, and I think some of us may be mentors there as well. So participate in that. You'll be surprised. People have energy and time to give to you for advancement of the field. So take that opportunity.
One thing about networking, and this is for all levels of different economists coming out of school, you don't go into a conversation, can you get me a job? That's a turnoff. You go in to find out, how did they go in their career? Where did they look? What were their first jobs like? As they start talking, you can say, well, I'm interested in that. Do you have any advice for that? Maybe a job will come up, but maybe that's a third conversation. Or maybe they will say, I don't really have anything for you, but I'm going to connect you with B. And then you talk to B, and then maybe they lead you to an opening that you can apply for. But don't make it all about you needing a job and can you get it for me, because that conversation will end quickly.
That is excellent advice, Michael. Thank you for that. I would love to hear from a little bit kind of quickly from everybody. If you are thinking about some maybe entry-level talent in your organization, I know many of you are perhaps at a point in your career where you don't rub shoulders with entry-level people as much, but just thinking about somebody who's trying to break into this field for the first time, what qualities would really stand out to you, whether it's a specific skill or a specific set of classes they've taken, or just sort of characteristics? And going back to what Beth was talking about with strengths, like what does somebody need to bring to the table to really impress you? Let's start with Beth, if you don't mind.
Sure. Jazz, a couple years ago, I went to a conference on skill sets that are needed for the green economy that was held at OECD in Paris. And it was a very insightful conversation. And one of my big takeaways was a report from Rhodes University in South Africa that they did for the UN and some other organizations. And they talked about 3 core skill sets that really people need to have to be successful in a green economy. The first one is a technical skill set. You need to know how to do something, right? Specific. So you've got, all of the skills of data analysis and et cetera, your economics toolkit, so to speak. The second one is relational. You need to be able to get along well with other people. That's what a job interview is about. You've passed the bar, that you're qualified. They're trying to see, are you going to be a nice person to work with? If I have to go on a business trip with you, am I going to like you, or am I going to be tearing my hair out, right? How are you going to play in the playpen, the sandbox with other people in our organization? And then the third skill set, the third area is what's called transformational skills, or innovation skills is another way to think about that. How do you take problems and transform them into solutions, working with other people inside and outside the organization to add value to what the business, the organization is there to do, their mission. So those are the 3 that I would really recommend people think about. And those are the things that I encourage people to try to develop throughout their career.
Yeah, let me add to what you were saying, Beth, and to respond to that question. Few things that resonate with me. Consider life as kind of a long-term, one long university education. Okay, that's very, very important. Is the field of energy, as we have been talking, is transitioning, changing. So you need to be thinking with that mindset. What you're learning today, you'll not be doing in 5 to 10 years. Be curious. The path to innovation begins with curiosity. That's very important. So be curious about how things work and provide and develop that learning. The other thing, what Beth said is we look into that as well, is how we have people with aptitude, but we also look higher for attitude. So it goes both ways. You need to have aptitude of doing things, but the attitude is also important. And I'll end up with what Warren Buffett said one time: look for 3 things in a person: intelligence, energy, and integrity. And if they don't have the last one, don't worry, don't even bother with the first 2. Okay, so that's very important. So integrity and trustworthiness and attitude, those go a long way for your career.
I'll answer that in a little more mundane fashion, thanks to my philosopher friend Shri. But I would say for an entry-level position, what I value is people who can read and write in complete sentences. I think that's very important to be able to articulate thoughts in a coherent fashion and express them. Also, prudence. In an organization like mine, everybody's smart. Everybody's got some skill that sets them apart. That's why they're there. But let people speak at meetings. Let them say what they have to say, and then you'll get your chance. There's no point trying to cut people off. And then lastly, follow through on your assignments. If you're an entry-level person, you're going to be given tasks. You might not want to do them, but just get them done in the prescribed time, and that will please any boss I've ever met.
So my advice is, when you start looking to apply to a job, start thinking, how can I help that company or that organization or that government meet their goals? What skills can I bring? Don't enter into it like, well, I really want to work there because I think I'll learn a lot. Well, they're not educational organizations anymore. Yes, they want you to learn a lot, but you don't want to make it sound like this is all about what you're going to gain from it. You need to talk about, how can I help the organization? If you go in with your key point being, I majored in economics and I got a 3.7 grade point average, That's a minute discussion. That won't get you very far. What you need to be able to do is say, demonstrate some of the skills that you have. That could be a research paper. That could be a project. That could be a team project. You know, team projects, they love to hear about how you worked as a part of a team. You know, how good are you at teamwork? Talk about your leadership capabilities, maybe in a volunteer organization or a school government. Internships are really important. Summer jobs are really important. What companies and organizations want to know is, can you do something besides take a test or write an essay? They want you to be able to write clearly, but they want you to be able to do something that's not classwork. And so think of those things where it's not just a rote part of your classwork.
So yeah, well, one thing,
Any summer job, even if it's not an internship in economics, you worked for a boss. You had assignments. How did you do that? What did you help the organization do? That will help you get almost any job if it makes it look like you understood the organization, how you fit into it, and how did you perform? Did you outperform what the expectations were? So that I think all of those are important.
yeah, something that what Peter said is very, very important as well, and what Michael said is, don't join a job or don't get into something and then within a year or two say, oh, I'm not making any difference. You're given a task, complete it, okay? And complete to full satisfaction, because a lot of time what I'm hearing is students get in their first job and within a few months they feel that I'm not making a big difference. It's an entry-level job. The way I say that is you should not let your ambitions, grand ambitions, get too far ahead of opportunities that you have right in front of you. Okay, do your best in what is right ahead and then move on to your other things. That's very important. Otherwise, you will never get any, you will create all kinds of issues with your assignments at hand, the job, etc. So I just wanted to connect that with what others said.
I want to echo what Shri is saying. I think that's really important. The relationships that you have with your mates, as the Australians call it, is really important. So you want to be focusing on learning your role on the team. Who do you work with? What are their styles? How can you be more effective in the role that you're playing? And what your boss's big problems are, whatever they are, upstream from where you sit in the organization. What are those big things that your bosses and your boss's boss are being held accountable for? How can you help lighten that load for them and be a value add so that, your boss says, wow, this person has real potential. They're a self-starter. I'm going to give them this great new opportunity because I know they demonstrated follow through, as Peter is saying, and really stick-to-itiveness, so to speak. And so that relationship piece is important, and thinking on that global from that global standpoint is especially valuable.
I think another thing to think of is your first job is not your dream job. You are leaving college, especially as an undergraduate, without a lot of experience and without a lot of developed skills used in a workplace. What you want to do is to take a job that will allow you to use your skills, but also do things that you haven't done before. Your dream job may be, I need these skills and these experiences so that 7 years out, I'm in this spot, or 10 years out. Do not think that, oh, this is below me. I don't want to start there. You got to start somewhere. You'll learn some skills. You'll move. I think the other thing is that when I graduated, it was very common to marry the company that hired you, and you stay there for 34 years. I think most students today and most companies, they realize that marriage isn't going to work. It's going to work from either side. So make sure you're always improving your skills that you could use with another company in the same industry, or even skills that a different industry would like. So, you know, that's why I think you really have to focus on improving your skills, your experience, so that your career moves forward, not necessarily I have the best job ever and first time out, because you don't want to stay in that position for the 30 years. So
real quick, I do just want to point out that we are already past the hour. This has been a phenomenal conversation, and we will keep it going for a couple more minutes. But those of you who are participating and need to duck out for other commitments, that is completely fine. We did have one more question come in through the Q&A, and we will I think this one will be pretty quick. Oh, it looks like a couple more questions. Okay, so we'll try to tackle these two in the next 5 to 10 minutes, and then we will wrap it up there. So the first one was, could age limit the chance of getting an industry job? So I think that's a question about potentially ageism, essentially. So I'm curious if anybody has thoughts on that, or how to position yourself so that potentially ageism is less of a problem.
I would say, as part of the industry, I don't think so. The age, the kind of ages that we're talking about, people who are on the call, it really doesn't matter. Experience, skill set, what we have been talking about, for the field which is changing so dramatically, is very, very important. Michael gave the example of Google and Amazon and a few other companies. I was reading somewhere they are not even looking for undergrad degrees. They're looking for experience. They're looking for skills. So be skilled, and I think that would matter.
I will say a couple things on this. I get this question occasionally, and I think, unfortunately, there is age discrimination out there. You need to be mindful and pay attention to it. I mean, of course, there are always legal resources if you feel you have substantiation, and I hope it never comes to that for anyone. So be aware and stand up for yourself as you need to. I think from an organizational perspective, there are some questions I think that people are often trying to suss out. One of the questions sometimes people have about having a lot of experience or advanced degrees, is it from an employer perspective, are you pricing yourself out of the market? Are they going to be able to afford you, right? So that is a question. And to have a conversation with the HR people about the pay bands and all of that, that's a great way to kind of tackle that piece of it. Another part of it is, and sometimes this comes up in the type of role that you're applying for. So let's say you go on for an advanced degree and you're not getting a lot of callbacks on positions that you're applying for. There may be a concern on the organizational side that you're going to be bored in that position. So maybe there isn't a requirement for an advanced degree and you have that. So I think there are some questions that would go to thinking about your career strategy and how you position yourself so that those things are strengths for you and not drawbacks.
And I will add, going back to Michael and Beth's advice from earlier, use your network. This is where knowing people, getting to know folks in your industry at your target companies will really be helpful to you to get the right introductions. Okay, I'm gonna do one last question here, and then we will wrap it up. This question is from Spencer, and I think probably will be best addressed by Shri first. He says he's in an energy engineering program. Does this preclude me from applying for jobs in energy economics? So can you talk about that from an engineering perspective?
Good point. The answer is no. There's no issues with that. You know, generally, when you have an education in engineering, you would take economics as part of your curriculum. If you have not, take a few extra classes in that. I work in supply chain management organization of ConocoPhillips. We are hiring economists. We are getting engineers moving from field jobs into the kind of things that we are doing. So engineers are problem solvers by design. They look at a problem and they figure out how to solve it. In the industry, there's a lot of need for people like that. Maybe add courses or a minor or something in economics if you think that you haven't got that as part of the engineering education. And then you'll be okay. So that would be my answer.
My response to that question is engineers have very good quantitative skills. That's becoming more and more important. There are two companies out there that do a lot of energy analysis for companies and organizations, IHS Markit and Wood Mackenzie, for example. They hire lots of different people to come in and do energy modeling and energy forecasting, engineers, some economists. You know, it doesn't really matter if you have some technical skills, you have some good quantitative skills. You know, you're going to be very. You should be able to get them. I would say one of the challenges with energy engineering sometimes is a focus on project economics. And I would take some economics courses that talk about an industry or competition or something broader than just a project, because actually your project economics may be impacted because something that's going on in the market or will be going on in the market, and your price forecast is completely off because you're not paying attention, or you're not looking at, you know, who else is putting in these types of projects. And so your return may actually not be as good as you think because you have 40 different companies putting in the same thing and you're going to have an oversupply. So that would be my suggestion.
Perfect.
I work
Go ahead.
Just to close, I work for the DOE. The average age at my lab is 55. So ageism is not an issue. And I'm surrounded by engineers. So we'll take you. Whether you're old or an engineer, doesn't matter, just apply.
This is the only thing, you know, on what Peter and Michael said is just be an optimist. Show pragmatic enthusiasm. The field is really interesting. People don't like to follow pessimists, okay? The field is really changing. Be part of the change. That's what I would have to say.
I think that's an awesome note to end on. Thank you, Shri.
Can I have one last comment?
Wants to end.
A lot of these energy organizations are very engineering heavy. Being an economist can actually be an advantage because you think differently. You don't fall into groupthink. You have a different perspective and use that to your advantage. You know, you don't. I think that in my career was I was less likely to groupthink than 20 economists working on 20 engineers working on a project and not thinking of some of the broader issues. So.
Hey, Beth, do you have any last words you want to get in?
I think we're done. This has been a great conversation. I've appreciated all of the thoughtful questions from everyone.
All right. Thank you so much to all our panelists. That was a wonderful discussion. I learned a lot, and so I'm really grateful to that, and I hope everybody attending did as well. In just a second, I'm going to throw back to Rebecca, but I was asked by Professor Katie Black, my colleague at Kenyon, to also plug another webinar that's coming up, actually a series. It's on the USAEE website under webinars, and it's kind of similar to this one. It'll be hosted by Chiara Lopret at Penn State. Hopefully I pronounced their name correctly. And so the first one in the series will be this coming Wednesday at 1 o'clock, and it's called Energy Company Recruiting and Career Advice. So if this is something that has really lit your fire and you want to know more, check out that series coming up. I don't think I have anything else. Thank you all so much. Rebecca, feel free to close us out.
USAEE wishes to thank Jazz Glastra and our panelists for an outstanding webinar. This webinar will be available on USAEE's website for a future download. If you're not already a member of USAEE, we encourage you to join by visiting www.usaee.org. We thank you for attending, and I officially close this webinar.